And with that being said, I am very pleased. I am excited to introduce Tam Butler, who is going to be presenting today behaviorism training. So, Tam, thank you, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Welcome, everybody. What Anthony could have done was actually warned me that there were so many people going to come and attend, but that's fantastic. So I'm going to take you through behaviorism training this morning. Please pop questions into the Q&A box. I will be asking for participation. So when I pop up with questions, can you pop them into the chat box? And then, Anthony, if I could ask you to just monitor the chat box a little bit for me, that'd be fantastic.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. And then at the end, oh, we got Nick joining us. Hello, Nick. I'll let you introduce yourself in a moment. So what we'll do is I'll take you through the first half of the training, and then I shall pass over to Nick to finish up, and we'll have Q&A at the end. As I said, I will turn my camera off so I can, focus on the PowerPoint itself. So if I'm looking over here, it's because there's all my information over here and the camera is here. One last thing to say is that you can hear that I have an English accent, and I do occasionally, as Anthony certainly knows, and Nick certainly knows, will use verbiage that you may or may not understand because it's colloquialisms, it's slang. So always, question it. What do you mean by that, Tam? Or whatever. I really don't mind. It's just the way that, I use the language. Okay, so I'm going to pass it over to Nick, turn my camera off just to introduce himself, and then he'll pass it back to me and we'll deliver the training for you.
Hi there, folks. My name is Nick or Nicholas, as it says here on the screen. Mehrnoosh, I'm the behavior support trainer over in Region 1, basically everything east of the Cascades, and it's great to be here today with you all. I'm going to pass it back over to Tam.
Thank you very much. So, good morning and welcome. We're going to take you through behaviorism training, which is a provider's guide to behavior supports. And we'll go straight to the training objectives, which is that we'll review the function of behavior. We'll look at identifying behavior support tools and interventions, discuss the difference between reaction and response, and emphasize the importance of knowing your client, particularly for documentation and tracking. So, without further ado, the function of behavior. Well, there's four basic functions to behavior, and behavior is what we all do. Okay. Every human behaves in the environment that they're in. And when we look at functions of behavior, we have sensory, escape, attention, and tangible. Well, sensory is that provides us with that preferred sensory experience, and this behavior feels good for us. And so in that, obviously, we consider the five senses of sight, sound, smell, touch, taste. And this can include such things as having long baths, eating particular things, pacing, self-injurious behavior, and masturbation. Then we move on to escape. And what this does is remove us from an undesired activity or interaction. We remove ourselves, we escape from that situation. So consider behaving or presenting yourself in a manner that gets you out of that undesired situation. Now, this could be throwing items to get people away from you, hitting, yelling, really having poor hygiene to avoid the caregiver, saying, I've done it myself, or removing yourself away from the housemate, or avoiding the appointment that you need to go to. So that's escape, not answering the door when you arrive on the doorstep. Moving on, as you can see, into attention. And what this does is provides access to people or interactions, and often referred to as attention seeking. Well, us humans actually socially connect. So rather than attention seeking, let's look at it as attention needing. We're needing that social connection. Our brains are telling us we need to connect with people. And this can present in a variety of ways, such as manipulation or triangulation, making accusations, responding differently to different caregivers, yelling when a particular person enters the room, and requiring people to pay attention to the individual when they're paying attention to others. So, gaining that social connection. And as I say, attention needing as opposed to attention seeking. And then finally, tangible. What this does is provides preferred items or activities, and consider a means to gain access to an item or activity. Now, this could be aiming for that, watching your favorite TV, movie, but it can also be alcohol, aiming to gain alcohol via panhandling, if you like, nicotine, smoking, substance use, maybe a tangible gain. When I want a preferred item or activity, I will behave in such a way to gain it. Okay. So that's the four functions of us human behavior. So what impacts that? Very, very easily, three things. Physical, how we physically are, the environmental aspect, and the emotional aspect. So we're going to take through these three aspects of behavior, the impacts. Certainly, physical. Well, we need to rule in, assess for all these situations that can impact the individual and thus give rise to behaviors that are not conducive to them in the current situation. So infections can really impact the way we feel ready to answer the door. Yeah, pain, fatigue, constipation can really impact our mood and our behavior. If we're hungry, absolutely. And if we're thirsty, my goodness, that really does impact us. And then we've got to think of people that experience these physical situations and can't meet that need, can't get to gaining fluids, for example, and how that can impact their behavior. Environmental, as you can see, and I said earlier, the five senses, but they also include personal space, and other people around, even the temperature of the room, the garden, and any changes in that environment that could have occurred. And some examples of these triggers could be too much noise, commotion, or not enough stimuli. People get bored. It could be just environmental allergens, they've walked into a room that a dog was in earlier and they haven't taken an anti-allergy medication. Lighting, clutter, patterns such as wallpaper or carpets can really impact on people's vision and can have trouble with depth perception, and thus that makes them anxious to walk on that carpet because they keep seeing holes in the carpet because of the patterns on it. And certainly lack of privacy or loneliness or that completely new living arrangement, new roommates, and certainly media. Media can have a profound impact on our behavior. Just through watching, we're flooded with media nowadays. And certainly I think of media with the 24-hour news cycles, non-stop binge watching maybe can impact how we behave in relation to that situation, such as not getting up and getting ourselves a drink because we want to watch the next episode, that may impact and lead us into dehydration. Next, we have emotional. Now, some emotional triggers can be that we just feel overwhelmed. We've got too many appointments, too many people turning up at the door, too many names to remember. It just becomes overwhelming. And we could become disappointed. And disappointment may impact the way we set about a task because we're disappointed in ourselves. Anxiety can lead us to trepidation about approaching a task, a thing to do, opening the door to somebody. And certainly depression, that depressed state can create lethargy and limit our willingness to do things in life. Being fearful, being angry, being stressed, being bored. One of the biggest triggers of behaviors in everybody, I feel, is being bored. So I'd like to introduce this quote by Ashley Warner, and I think it nicely identifies the functions of all behaviors. Beneath every behavior, there's a feeling, and beneath every feeling is a need. And when we meet that need, rather than focus on the behavior, begin to deal with the cause and not the symptom. Okay, I'm going to move on into behavior support and interventions. So if I can say the first step to actually identifying and implementing a person-centered intervention is by and through assessment. And there are a multitude of assessment tools you can use. So in this section, we're just going to review some common ones that you probably already use. But our aim is to give you ones that you can use immediately in the situation. And this next one, this one, which I adore, is a very useful one. So this is our HALT assessment tool. And it's a first step to saying, okay, how can I meet that need for that person's behavior to adjust so it's acceptable and useful for them and beneficial for them in this current situation. And this HALT stands for asking the person if they're hungry, if they're angry, if they're lonely, or if they're tired. So give me an emoji thumbs up. Have you ever found yourself being hangry? The mixture of hungry and angry. Oh, look at all of those coming up. And we go away and find ourselves a chocolate bar or something similar, and all our behaviors, waiting in that queue, the barista getting our Starbucks wrong, actually all start to calm down. And that's because we're feeding our basic physiological need, and it meets our emotional need on top. Thank you so much for that response. So being hungry, being angry, being lonely, being tired are all common triggers that can impact behavior and a person's ability to self-regulate. So by assessing for and meeting these particular needs, we can assist the individual to return to a baseline functioning. And considering the Maslow's hierarchy of needs model, physiological needs must be met first. So I'm going to we gave you a handout. I'm hoping I can put it across here of Maslow's hierarchy of needs model. And as you can see at the bottom, we do need to sleep. We do need to feed ourselves. We want to be together with our safety needs, so we're not so angry. And we need to, be with one another to stop us being lonely, because we do that social connection. Just as a quickie, anybody know when Abraham Maslow actually wrote his theory? Is a human motivational theory? Abraham Maslow, hierarchy of needs. Pop it in the chat for us, please. Anybody got any idea when he wrote that? And so just seeing if anything comes through there, give us a year. Thank you very much, Carly. Thank you, Sarah. Certainly, Maslow actually worked with the Blackfoot tribe in this country and developed his theory based on their community aspect of and perspective of hierarchy of needs. So I always encourage people to go and look at the Blackfoot tribe hierarchy of needs, whereas they focused on, absolutely, Maggie, focused on the community. Abraham Maslow focused on the individual. So reading them both really helps us to understand that social connection and our need to be in that community. So thank you, Maggie. Absolutely. 1943, Angelica, fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to common assessment screens, and you can see here common assessment tools. So we've got tracking sheets. Tracking sheets are really useful. Tell me, do you use any form of tracking sheets? If so, why? And what do you track with them? So answers in the chat window for me. Do you use any tracking sheets? And if so, why do you use them? And I've got an example. Oh, there's my example. I'll show you. Here's another example, a smoke tracker. People often smoke cigarettes, especially those who, oh, they're all coming in, thank you. Particularly people that may have been institutionalized, although obviously people, institutions now in Washington state don't allow smoking internally. But if they've been in institutions for quite a long time, often you'll find that they smoke nicotine and it can impact on their behavior. So we suggest people, does it work for them? Does it help them? Do they, how does it work for them? So that's just an example of a tracker that we give out. Certainly, we've got trackers here, numerical pain scale, food intake, fantastic. Julie, how do you do food intake? Do you do a percentage of the plate? Do you do a quarter of the plate, half the plate? Because it can be really difficult to actually look at a plate and say, oh, they've had 3/4 of that, or they've had 25% of that. How much was on the plate in the beginning? So we have to be clear as to how we really use the tracking log and ask people to, and pictures help, demonstrate what is considered half a plate full perhaps, or half a cup, etc., etc., if we can't physically measure things. Okay, exercise, mood tracking, tracking food, thank you, Teresa, pain, anxiety, depression, and often basic tracker logs, a medication administration record sheet. Okay, now that's another one. We can use them for sleep patterns. I always encourage people to monitor sleep over the 24-hour period, because little naps can actually calm our brain and refresh us, especially if we're experiencing neurocognitive loss. So, that's why we do the 24-hour tracking. Okay, sugar levels, absolutely, Nora. Thank you very much. Scales. Anybody use scales in any way? Any scales? So we've got a variety of scales here, not just weight scales, but we've got a pain scale here. And food scale, fantastic. Tell me more, Eileen. Write it in that chat window. And certainly scales are really useful. But I will suggest if we're needing to measure the weight of a person, use the same scale at the same time, because scales can differ, albeit slightly, but they can differ, and that can actually be impactful from a medication management side for a prescriber. And also pain scales. Thank you, Eileen. The pain scales, we've got one here showing it like emoji-like faces. You can change that. But this one, I would have to question, is the person colorblind? Because they may not be able to see the difference between the sort of greenish in the middle and the red at the end. So these are the things that you need to sort of double check with the individual. Yes, here's a pain scale. Can you actually decipher it? Does the emoji mean anything to you? If it doesn't, change it. Is the colors meaningful to you if they don't, change them? And so being aware that your person-centered driving to make sure that the whatever you're scaling, tracking is suited for that individual. And then finally, we have a measurement tool here. And the measurement tool is just that blood sugar monitoring tool there, glucose monitoring. Again, make sure it works, make sure we understand what we're monitoring, and that is what really helps and also if the client can actually see the numbers on, because they can be quite tiny, can the client actually see, is there an alternative? Is there a voice operative scale measurement tool? Things like that. So being person-centered as to looking at as to what tool we can enhance the individual to use for themselves. So there's some common assessment tools. And the way to really approach from an effective intervention aspect to gain more tools for your assessment is ensuring that we do get the individual's attention before we talk. Making sure we're in maybe their vision sight, hearing sight, just to make sure that we are approaching them in a way that doesn't cause anxiety. There is a lot going on with that pain scale, isn't there, John? And so we may need to simplify that as well. So back to getting the individual's attention before we talk, we need to be aware of their preferred method of communication. Now, that could be another language, that could be pictorial, that could be American Sign Language. And just off note, sign languages across the globe have got similarities, but they're not the same. For example, the British Sign Language uses two hands, the American Sign Language uses primarily one, particularly for words, okay? So ensuring that we know how the individual communicates and adapt ourselves to their communication method. When approaching an individual, always approach them from the front. And this is a trauma-informed approach, a universal trauma-informed approach. You prevent startling people and you make your presence known. And this is particularly important from a trauma informed approach and a sensory limited somebody with sensory limitations, cognitive impairments, mental health diagnoses, and courteousness, I think, ensuring that we always approach from the front. Identify ourselves. And this is where I find basic sign language comes in really useful. And often I slip into it a little bit. So identify yourself by your name and your role and be prepared to repeat yourself. Okay? Wearing your badge with your name displayed also helps the person to back up and say, oh, especially if they've got short-term memory loss, that people can forget your name quite instantaneously. So having your name presented nice and big and clear helps them and encourages them to feel like, you know, it's okay. They can use your name and it reminds them of your name. When we're providing any assistance, we need to ask permission. And it's important to be clear, direct, and not to rush. So, if needed, describe each step of the task you are assisting with and ensure the support being provided is understood and welcomed. And during my time of caregiving, I would often literally label each task I'm about to do. Okay, miss, I'm going to hand you this, and is it okay if I do this now? Um, Double checking, always gaining the permission. Use task appropriate body language. This includes being professionally appropriate, non-verbal communication for the support being provided. Um, you know, I often come across people standing up with their arms folded. I'm a very, very short person. So as soon as I get a tall person standing and looking at me with their arms folded, I feel that I'm in trouble. Okay, I feel that I'm going to be told off. So it puts me on the back burner, slightly makes me angry. So when we approach people, we need to be open. Often palms up helps, okay? Or just relaxed in our lap in front of us, palms up again. And finally, routine. Do we all like to be woken up and the curtains flung open and told, get in the shower? Give me an angry face if that's a no. Give me a thumbs up if that's a yes. I think you've got angry faces on your emojis. Yeah. Brilliant, fantastic, something. No, we don't. If the alarm goes off, we often tut about it. We will turn over in our own time, turn it off, or be fast about it. Um, we may slowly sort of rub our eyes and wake ourselves up and then say, right, we better get ourselves to work. We really set our minds to how we use that routine for ourselves. So we need to ensure that we are respecting the person's routine who we're providing support to. It's their routine that we need to meet, not create their routine to meet our needs. Okay. This is where that flexibility of timings, some people might like to lie in the weekends. And that's back to our westernized work perspective of 9 to 5, perhaps. And so we need to be aware of that and adjust accordingly. We may need to go in at 9 o'clock in the morning, Monday to Friday, but actually Saturday and Sunday, it's more like 10:30. And that's respecting people's routine. Okay, moving on to what does it mean to distract or redirect? Now, over the years, I've seen lots and lots and lots and lots of support plans, care plans that state when a client becomes upset, maybe verbally angry, escalating, and the response for me as the caregiver is distract or redirect. And so what does that mean? Well, distract means divert one's attention to something from something worrisome or unpleasant by doing something different or more pleasurable. And that ties us back into that functions of behaviors. What does it mean to redirect? Well, it means to direct something or someone to a new or different place or purpose. Okay, that could be from a halt perspective, directing somebody to make themselves a drink. Are they hungry? Are they angry? Are they lonely? Or they're tired? Okay. But what I look for in the care plans is telling me what the person wants distracted with. What do they like doing? which is different or more pleasurable. What does the person like to be redirected to? What is new or different, or that will help them to de-escalate, to reduce their anxiety? If that person-centered planning is not done, then what am I to distract or redirect with? A herd of elephants? Because I don't know. And that's why it's so important to sit with the individual and emphasize if they're experiencing anxiety, mood dysregulation, is to what do we actually do to support you? How do you want me to support you? What is the preferred activity that we can redirect you to? What type of breathing exercises can we encourage you to do specifically? Is it a box breathing? Is that a counted breathing method? Is it square breathing? What is it? And how do you want me to reinforce that positive behavior? Is that by verbal encouragement? Is that by sitting quietly with you whilst listening to your favorite music? And these are the actions and written documentation that we need in that care plan. And lastly, if I'm going to change the subject because that helps distract you or helps redirect you, what do I change the subject to? Now, certainly for Anthony and I, you would change that subject to our favorite discussion, which is Premier League football, okay? Or European football. So distracting and redirecting us to focus on field hockey wouldn't do us anything. It wouldn't change our mood. So being specific as to what the caregiver distracts or redirects the individual to is very, very crucial. Okay, just a quick go through some physical interventions from an assessment perspective. Okay. So we need to assess for pain, discomfort, injury, or illness. And therefore, we can develop the interventions, which is an approved treatment or a coping strategy that's been agreed with the individual. We may need to offer a PRN, pro rata medication. And we always want to do non-pharmacological interventions first. Okay. We may need to consult a medical professional because there's something going on and we cannot resolve it or it's not being resolved. And we need to describe the behavior in the client record. From a continuity of care recommendation, we need to keep a record of the individual's diseases or medical conditions and support them to be aware of them as well, alongside any medication side effects, and document that. The individual needs to be able to describe any of the medication side effects for us to be able to report it back or them to report it to the medical professional. So it's important that they know as well. And if like you distracted myself and Anthony to talk about Premier League football and it's worked and we've stopped arguing and fighting over that can of soda, then write that down because that's a non-pharmaceutical intervention that works for us. Write it down for others to say, okay, we know how to redirect them to. And any professional documentations need to be written down on the client's record for purposes of ongoing continuity of care. And you will see that from an environmental perspective, these things literally stand the test of time. If we continue with looking at a change of the environment, turning the music down, putting a different music on, changing the heat, offering those calming sensory items. This could be a case of lavender or bergamot. that will help us just calm it, help the smells, even the visual of the lavender. It could be a lavender soft fluffy pillow to hold. That helps us just to regulate ourselves. Um, Medical disclaimer: always ensure that ask a medical professional, and ensure client is not allergic to anything. Okay, that's my medical disclaimer. And consult the medical or mental health professional. And again, you can see these continuity of care recommendations exactly the same. Okay. And if that intervention works, write it down. So the next caregiver that comes in, the next professional that needs to talk to the client, etc., says, okay, we know that works with that client, and talk over how it worked with the client, and thus engaging in that positive behavior response, and say, excellent, we can incorporate perhaps more of that as an overall aspect. So having Anthony and I watch more football would actually put us in a fabulous place, I think. And certainly moving on to the emotional interventions. Again, you can see very similar things. Certainly, we need to know about the mental health symptomology that impacts the individual. We need to ask the individual how their diagnosis impacts them. How do they experience it? Because individuals' conditions, individuals' diagnosis can impact people in different ways. So, from a person-centered driven perspective, it is just that, asking the individual how, if they've got coping strategies for when they're feeling rather tearful in relation to the depression diagnoses. Ask and making sure that we all share that information. Again, offering that PRM and consulting with a medical and mental health professional. Certainly, psychotropic medications can have an array of medication side effects. So we need to be aware of them. The individual needs to be aware of them, again, to be able to relate to others how they're experiencing this. Okay, Nick, could I pass it over to you, please? And pass it back to me as and when you want to.
Absolutely, no problem. So we're going to pick up talking about reaction versus response. It's one of my favorite sections, and so I'm very happy that Tam is passing this one over to me. So let's talk about some common behaviors associated with stress. And before I give you any sort of obvious answers, what are some common responses to stress from your perspective? Go ahead and type it into the chat. Think about it. How do you react to stress? What are some ways that you feel when you're under stress? What are some behaviors that you engage in? Please. Get angry? Thank you. Frustrated, upset stomach, overwhelmed, crying, anxious, anger shut down. Ooh, great answers. Fantastic. Body tension, negative thoughts. Overeating. I definitely can relate to that one. Headache, jaw clenching, poor concentration, avoidance. These are all fantastic, fantastic responses. Thank you. So let's go ahead and talk about some common ones, many of which you've already mentioned. First one there is irritability and or being impatient. Next one is being withdrawn. And this can be either physically and or emotionally and or mentally. Withdrawing from a conversation doesn't necessarily mean you have to physically leave the conversation. The next one is being anxious, feeling anxious, having that anxious tension. Oh, disassociate. Thank you, Joyce. That's a good one. And then there, of course, is resentful and or being angry, as many of you already mentioned. And my favorite one here, other. This other one includes any and all reactions. Each of us are unique individuals with unique histories, and we come from unique cultures. And I don't just mean necessarily segmenting based on areas of the world. Each of our families have their own unique culture. We have unique practices, and this then causes us to react differently to stress and to different stressful stimuli in our environments. And with that, let's talk a little bit about the reaction versus response. Now, we're going to examine the difference between these two. First, a reaction is behaving without thought. A reaction is simply behaving without thought. And this includes being emotional and physical, feeling triggered and or provoked, feeling defensive, taking things personally, making assumptions, and of course, having an inherent lack of patience. Now, all of these are how we react. Now, let's take a look at responding. How do we respond? Well, responding is behaving with thought, taking into consideration all the different factors before engaging in a behavior with others. So, this includes being clear and aware of your actions, being aware of and avoiding triggers that you've known that trigger you in the past, observing and assessing the situation, taking a moment for composure, and of course, identifying the best approach based on the facts of the situation. These are all fantastic, fantastic ways to make sure that you're responding with thought and being conscientious, as we like to put it. Let's take a look at professional conduct. Now, professional conduct and our reactions versus responses. To maintain professional conduct, self-awareness is key, and self-awareness includes recognizing your triggers, being aware of verbal and nonverbal communication strategies, and of course, taking action to alter your behaviors. And of course, ultimately at the end, the goal is to commit to safety and quality of service. Again, the goal is to commit to safety and quality of service. And your response has the power to either de-escalate or escalate a situation. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at an activity. So in this activity, there's a scenario, and the scenario is a client refuses to take medication and immediately throws water at you. Now, in the chat window, I'd like you to answer a couple questions. The first one is, how would you react? How would you react? And remember, a reaction is being triggered, acting defensively, taking things personally. How do you react? How would you react to a client throwing water at you? Laugh? I feel that. Stay calm? Okay, good. Jump back and yell no? Thank you, Elise. What else? Keep them coming. How would you react? Remember, any and all answers are accepted. And be shocked and quiet? Absolutely. Find a towel. Appropriate, John. Be surprised? Good, good, good. Ask why they did that? Of course. Excuse myself and walk away? Okay, walk away. Good, good. Well, let's take a look at the second question then. And remember, remember the difference between reaction versus response. How do you respond? What assessment tools and interventions might you use? Type your answers into the chat. How would you respond? And remember, a response is behaving with thought. Would ask them why they took that action. Excellent, excellent. Breathe and have them look at you. Very good. Making eye contact can sometimes be some of the most powerful ways to engage somebody. Have they asked if they want to talk about it? Good. Excellent. Excellent. Good, good, good. Keep an eye. Would say, I can see you're upset. I'll reiterate the importance of his medication, try to engage him in taking them. Yeah, very good. Thank you. Setting boundaries afterwards. All excellent. Anybody else? Any other particular ways? How would you respond? Remember to assess the situation appropriately. Asking questions can be important, can be vitally important, but also paying attention to their body language, looking in their eyes, seeing if their face is grimacing. Now, obviously, like a multitude of different observations can lead to a multitude of different types of conclusions. However, we can make some assumptions, especially if, well, I mean, some insinuations on assumptions based on the evidence. And if the evidence shows or indicates the client might be feeling afraid or triggered, we might try to pay attention to why that trigger is there. Asking the pain or uncomfortable. Very good, Amy. Thank you. Excellent. You guys did a fantastic job. And with that, let's go ahead and put, Tam, shall we take a 5 minute break before we continue on?
Uh, Anthony, do you take breaks? I'm gonna pass that to Anthony.
Normally we don't, but this is such great information. I mean, I guess we could kind of pose it to the chat. I mean, real quick, we do a quick poll. Who wants to take a quick 5 minute and come back and finish up? I mean, you guys decide. This is a democracy. What do y'all think?
I'm seeing quite a few yes pleases.
And Nick, you and I both know that we focus on rehydration and physical movement, and that helps from a halt perspective to regulate us. So great idea. What time are we going to come back?
Why don't we come back at, let's say, 9:58? Good old straight up 5 minutes.
Thank you.
All right, excellent. See you all in just a few. All right. I think we're at, actually, I just crossed over into 9:59, so I suppose we should keep on going. Hopefully everybody's been able to rehydrate and stretch out their legs, and it's back to finish it up. So, in this final section of our training, we are going to be talking about documentation tools and tracking and the importance of knowing your client. So, some of the key components to building rapport include being respectful and calm, using the individual's preferred name, and avoiding nicknames and terms of endearment like honey, sweetie, and buddy. Keep in mind that rapport building is incredibly important for not only building trust with your clients, but also gaining the knowledge you need in order to understand them appropriately. The next one is take your time. Move at the individual's pace. Meet them where they're at. Allow for the individuals to set the tone and to create a mutual routine. Then support the individual to complete tasks for themselves as they can. Encourage independence and self-confidence. And this can be a teaching moment, not only for them, but also for yourself. In addition to that, listen to concerns. Practice that active listening. This includes nonverbal communication and working towards a resolution. If an individual continues to express concern related to residential or caregiving issues, right, empower the individual to contact RCS and their ombudsman. Provide the appropriate contact information for whatever issue may come up. This shows the provider is listening and not minimizing any concerns. And then, of course, focus on the individual. Don't try to multitask while you're providing care, and minimize distractions. Keep your phone away at work and be present and attentive for the individual. Next, identify and set mutual boundaries. There are 5 core values of humility-informed care that support professional relationships and boundary setting, and these include safety, transparency, choice, collaboration, mutuality, and empowerment. And we'll look at these in more detail on the next slide. So, as I mentioned, these are the 5 core values of humility-informed care. Now, does it make sense how rapport building is connected to documenting and tracking? Think about that question. I'm going to ask that again to you as I go through these. Safety. This includes creating spaces where people feel culturally and emotionally and physically safe, as well as awareness of an individual's discomfort or unease. The next is transparency. This includes providing full and accurate information about what's happening and what's likely to happen next. You want them to understand the process, but not only understand it, be a part of that process. Choice. This includes the recognition of the need for an approach that honors the individual's dignity and, more to the point, gives them the autonomy over their lives. Collaboration, mutuality. This includes the recognition that healing happens in relationships and partnerships with shared decision-making. And of course, empowerment. This includes the recognition of an individual's strengths, and these strengths are built on and validated through repeated actions, much of which is included in the previous ones mentioned. Now, the question that I asked before, does it make sense how rapport building is connected to documenting and tracking? Go ahead and type your answers in the chat. Yes or no? What do you think? Yes? Thank you. Fantastic. 100%. Thank you, Paul. Yes, love that. Love it. Beautiful. Beautiful. Just like if you were studying for a test, right? You got to make sure you review all the necessary material, and that's the same principle applies. Engaging with your clients, understanding them, getting to know who they are, that can help you document accurately and provide the type of care that they need. Now, let's take a look at some important components of documentation. Documentation should be clear, objective, and descriptive. Clear in the sense of it should be easy to perceive and understand and interpret from multiple different angles. It needs to be objective, not influenced by personal feelings or opinions, and considering and representing facts. I myself I in my previous life, I was a clinician, and I had a hard time sometimes early on in my career when I was documenting, writing progress notes, and keeping my opinions out of the note itself. Was I intentionally trying to write like something, an opinion or whatnot? No, of course not. But even as we go through and as we go through our day, and if we feel tired or if we've come to a conclusion in our minds, sometimes that can be reflected in how we write and what we're writing down, which is why you need to be descriptive, serving or seeking to describe, and only describing based on the facts of the situation, not based on your own conclusions. Now, here's a really cool documentation tool using the ABC model. The first step to documentation is identifying the need that the individual is attempting to meet. Circling back to the beginning of today's training, we discussed the four functions of behavior: S for sensory, E for escape, A for attention, and T for tangible. Now, looking at the ABC model on the screen, an antecedent is a stimulus that cues an organism or an individual, more accurately, to perform a learned behavior. When an organism perceives an antecedent stimulus, it behaves in a way that maximizes reinforcing consequences and minimizing any sort of punishing consequences. Basically, we encounter a particular trigger in our environment, which then leads us to perform a behavior. And as the trigger continues to be elicited, or we continue to recognize that trigger, we then engage in behaviors. And certain behaviors that lead to what we perceive to be positive consequences are ones that we will then engage in repeatedly, as opposed to ones that may provide a negative consequence or a punishing consequence, as I just mentioned. We'll explore these further. The ABC model was originally developed by Albert Ellis, who's an American psychologist in 1979. And using the ABC model for a guide to documentation enables us to be clear, descriptive, and objective. And this systematic approach addresses behavior as a part of a process in terms of what is going on prior to the behavior, i.e. the antecedent, the event itself, which is the behavior, and what happened following the behavior, which is the consequences. Now, same as with assessing, that when documenting, ask yourself the same questions. What happened before the behavior? What was happening around them? Is the behavior new? What makes it worse? What is being communicated by the behavior? Remember, there is no behavior that just is unto itself. And are there patterns? Are they bored? What changed? And when doesn't the behavior occur? Now, this, along with other assessment tools, enables us to identify patterns, determine what works and what doesn't work, and further assist with the development of personalized interventions, which we will look at on the next slide. And for this right here, I'd like to pass this over to Tam, because Tam is the one who actually developed this fun little tool here. And I would love to hear her expertise on it.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you very much. Okay, so I designed this tool several years ago and have used it in a variety of situations. And we're going to actually use it today. So as you can see, the EPIC tool here is an acronym, and it helps us really look from a holistic perspective at the individual from an environmental, physical, emotional, communication perspective. And it just gives us a framework to help us categorize facets of an individual life, but comes at it from a holistic perspective. And by objectively examining and documenting the occurrence or the pattern of the behavior, we can develop further strategies to intervene when the behavior is undesirable for both the individual and the care team. This further categorization helps us maintain a record of what's ruled out. Oftentimes, it's coming really useful to highlight how a person is impacted by their depression, but actually what that leads to is recurring urinary tract infections, which increases confusion. I will say, I'll put that disclaimer in there, can increase confusion, leading to behaviors that are undesirable. And this tool just helps us keep that in mind, or helps us uncover that pattern. So we're going to go ahead and use this, and we're going to use this in a way with yourselves, and just a quick way of looking at it. Because the more informed we are about an individual, the more we can build up a picture of them and their needs. And John, Rima, yes, keeping a record of past meetings helps to know the client's life. And also, it helps the client keep track. And I think somebody else said that also. And so that's that dignity, respect, and ownership of and not fear and empowerment that we can support the client to be. And so this tool is beneficial not just for us, but also the individual to see and maintain that record. And thus the individual can set goals and plans and learn to recognize how a particular behavior can impact their lives in both a positive and or a negative way. So we're going to use it. And remember that scenario we discussed earlier, i.e., medication refusal, client refuses the medication and throws water at you. So we're going to go through the EPIC tool and I'm going to ask you for some responses in that chat window. So from a environmental perspective, what are some of the questions you can ask to discover some environmental triggers or impacts? What will you ask to collect further details? All you have is the individual has refused the medication and thrown the water at you. So think from an environmental perspective, what can you then ask to discover what's going on with the person's response? From an environmental perspective, what could you ask? Answers in fantastic. Are you hot, cold? Is it too hot or too cold? Maybe there are bright lights. What room is the client in? Are there others around? Fantastic. Proximity from the client to the CM, case manager, care team. Yeah. Are there lots of sounds around, music or extra noise? What else have we got going on here? Do you need to take a break and be by yourself? Great one. If there's lots going on, we're asking ourselves what's happened before the behavior. You know, the doorbell was going, the radio was on, the TV was on, the kettle was beeping, and some disembodied voice was talking to us called Alexis or Siri. And if people experience auditory hallucinations, that can be quite confusing. Does the client know what the pills are? That would probably sit under the emotional, maybe the communication. Okay, so we're going to move now. Fantastic answers. It could be environmental, that they've just come in from a day of supported employment, sat down, and there's the caregiver saying, here's your medication you need to take in, here's your water. And they're like, give me 5 minutes, guys. Yep, taking a break. It could be a brand new caregiver. And they don't know that actually they prefer taking milk with their medication and not water. Yeah. It could be there's a new housemate. And this is so much about looking at the housing situation, the environment, where they've been, where they've come to. Is it what's going on? How are you feeling right now? Absolutely. Let's move over to the physical. What are some of the questions you can ask to discover potential physical triggers, impacts, and what will you ask to collect further details? So think the physical side of it. The physical side. Is it the taste of the medication? Great one. Are you feeling any pain? Fantastic. Then we'd pull out maybe a pain scale for them to show us. Does the client need liquid or crushed medications? Perhaps they can't swallow. Okay. FYI, medications, crushed medications are to be used for physical and physical ailments, not behavioral diagnostic diagnoses. Okay. Is the water too cold? Yeah. And it could be can the client hold the cup? Is it their preferred cup? I love that, Jennifer. I love that. Because it could be it's a white cup and everything and it's in the white kitchen, and I actually can't see what you're holding out. So I reached for and knocked it. Yeah. Is the client hungry? Yes. Is the client hungry? Yep. And what is there a diagnosis that's impacting that behavior? Do we need to consult the medical team? Are there those concerns with the medication? Have they changed? Are they a different color? They gone from a named brand to a generic. And so I don't even recognize the medication you're handing to me. Of course I'm going to refuse it. Nobody's told me that it's changed. Thank you, Jerry. Is it hard to swallow, like we said? You know, I prefer milk, not water. Did the individual get enough sleep? Is it like very early in the morning for them? Because it's timed medication, and we may now need to move that because they sleep in more. All of these questions can help us. And when we use Epic, we try and keep it in those segments to really try and thoroughly explore every aspect. Let's move on to emotional now. Same question. What are some of the questions you can ask to discover potential emotional triggers, impacts? What will you ask to collect further details? What's occurring emotionally for that person? What could have been a trigger, emotional trigger for them? I'll suggest one. Oh, we got a message. Yeah. What has upset you? Fantastic, Timmy. Are you having a bad day? Monica. Absolutely, Jennifer. That's what I was going to go to. What is the date? Is it an anniversary to a death of a family? Or, yeah, this is where that building up that rapport that Nick was talking about gradually enables the client to tell you this information. That then you can use from a redirection aspect, distraction aspect. See how it all starts to really mingle into one. Have they seemed to be more withdrawn than usual? Assessive, there has been something that triggered the client. Absolutely. And so thus why we're asking these questions. Yeah. What's upset you? What, you don't seem the same. Is something worrying you? Yeah. Or did I use your nickname as the caregiver? Did I say hello, sweetie? And you're like, don't call me that. Or am I a new caregiver and you don't know whether to trust me or not? Especially if, you know, maybe you've been institutionalized, maybe you've experienced abuse in an institution. And yeah. So therefore, we've got to think of all those things. Absolutely. And finally, communication. What questions can you ask to discover potential communication triggers impacts? What will you ask to collect further details? Absolutely, John. Is there a medication change? And from a communication perspective, was that communicated with the client? What are some questions you can ask to discover potential communication triggers or impacts? Pop some responses in that chat window. I know I've asked for you to pop lots in there. Fantastic. Has there been any changes of diet, baseline, medications? Am I speaking too loud? Thank you so much. I actually am partially deaf, so I need people to face me and talk to me because I monitor how their lips move to aid my hearing. Okay, and so if you don't talk to me, look at me and talk, I don't know necessarily what you're talking about all the time. I have to pick up and listen and it gets broken up. Is it the right time of day? Ah, yeah. Like we said, you could just woke me up and thrust the medication in front of me. I don't know. Is it the right time of day? Can the client see me approach them? Fantastic. Absolutely. Again, that's that non-verbal communication that we're now thinking of. Do you understand your medication? Take some time. Explain it with me. Yeah. Do you prefer to take your medication with food? Absolutely. We can ask that one so easily. So, what we could do from this situation, if, for example, the medication is refused and water is thrown at you, it could be that there's too many people in the kitchen while you're trying to give me the medication. It makes me feel really uncomfortable, and thus I get really nervous, and that impacts my anxiety, which is the physical aspect. And so then I start becoming withdrawn, emotional aspect, and I don't communicate with you, or my non-verbal communication is throwing the water or pushing the water away. And so we can absolutely use this tool to really drill down on A, how do we approach? B, what room do we do it in? How do we make you feel more secure? How do I approach you? Etc., etc. And those formulate that personalized interventions and that person-centered care planning. Okay. All righty. So this is, like I say, a really simple tool that can be really useful to analyze people's behaviors. All right, let's move on. I have, Nick, is that how you imagined it? Sorry, imagined, that's the wrong word. How you foresaw me going through it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Excellent. Um, I do find that one useful. So, right, we're back on describing in, and this is a negotiated service agreement that is found in adult family homes. Obviously, if you've got care plans, you may use a different format, but in essence, the details are the same. And that means that we need to describe the behavior objectively. And as we can see on the left hand of your screen here, a list of those descriptions. The more we describe things so others know what it means. For example, we've got disruptive behavior. So I'd want to see what do you mean by that? What is disruptive? Okay. So that needs to be described. And all we know is the client refuses to take medication and throws water at the caregiver. And so there's a resistiveness for taking the medication, and the disruptiveness is there of throwing the water. What I will suggest is that when water is offered, and I always encourage if people need support to emotionally regulate, to provide them water without ice in a very lightweight cup. Because if it is thrown at you, I don't want ice coming at me because it may end up in my eye. And I don't want a heavy water cup, insulated cup, that can be thrown at me and hurt me. Okay? Paper cups don't fly too far, okay? Because they don't keep the structure. So that's why I suggest those things. So what we need to list is, again, the clear, objective, descriptive description of the behavior. So I'm not going to get it confused as the caregiver, but what we want is the client's strength. What can the client do? Well, the client can put the medication in their own mouth. And John, you put how was it presented by hand, pillbox on the table? That can be added to that as well. Client can take medication with water, so we know it's water. Client is aware of medication schedule, so they know this is the right time of day for you to be approaching them with the medications. So moving on to how the caregiver does provide that medication is really specifically drawing it out. Caregiver to offer medication in a private, discreet manner, which we said earlier about there's too many people in the room. Client will notify a caregiver, and we put the acronym here, CG, will notify the client of their medication time. Okay, so we know it's on the same time. Caregiver to ask the client if they're ready to take their medications and offer a choice of water, juice, pudding, or applesauce. We cannot be putting medications within the pudding or within the applesauce, because that's then covering and hiding the medication, which is not allowed. And also because some medications have what they call an enteric coating, which is the chemical part of the medication. And apple sauce is acidic, it may eat into the actual medication. That's why a pharmacy and a doctor are the lead people that will direct you if the person needs assistance to swallow with a pudding or applesauce. Seek that direction from the doctor. Double check with the pharmacy that the medication can actually handle being in something other than just taken it by the mouth with water. Carrying on in this description, we've got, if not ready, caregiver to offer meds every 15 minutes within the medication time frame. Caregiver responds to water throwing by asking the client, did I do something to upset you, or did I startle you, in a calm voice? Caregiver to set verbal boundary and remind client it's not okay to throw water at caregiver. Caregiver to distance self from client's reach. And then caregiver to document on medication administration record sheet and behavioral log. So you're being really descriptive as to what the caregiver is expected to do and how to do it and how to record it. And certainly another format, as I showed earlier, this is now a field smoke tracker. It noted at 8:15, the person appeared tired. At 9:45, they had increased pacing whilst having a cigarette. At 11:20, they were quite pleasant. Again, 12:30 in the afternoon, lethargic, pleasant at 3:45, increased pacing at 5, and then anxious, pressure speech at 8, and tired at 10:20. Well, what I can tell from this is if that pattern is repeated, I know at 5 o'clock I'm going to see increased pacing. I know at 9:45 in the morning I'm going to see increased pacing. I'm going to look for that because that's a regular pattern of behavior of the person. Is when it changes. Okay, what else is going on? So if that lethargy then starts going from 2:20 and it is repeated right up to 8 o'clock, there's something going on here. Okay, and that's where we talk with the client and perhaps suggest medical or a mental health provider intervention. Okay, Nick, do you want to do the quiz time, please?
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and have some little bit of fun with quiz time. So we have 10 fun questions for you. And so we're going to go through each of these one at a time, and I would appreciate if you would type your answers into the chat. So the first question, what does the acronym SEAT stand for? What does the acronym SEAT stand for? What do you think? What does the acronym SEAT stand for? One of these days I'm going to find a way to get some Jeopardy music or something. Sensory escape, attention, intangibles. Good, good. Anybody else?
Can I just say, I do love Timmy's response. Thank you, Timmy. I love honesty.
Absolutely. You all are correct. Sensory escape, attention, intangibles. That is what SEAT stands for. Let's go to the next one, number 2. Blank is behaving without thought. Blank is behaving without thought. Wow, that's fast. Look at all those answers coming in real quick. Well, you know what? I'm not going to hold back the answers for you since you all are just jumping at it. Reaction, absolutely. Reaction is behaving without thought. Now, what are three components that impact behavior? Number three, what are three components that impact behavior? It's early on in the training. Tim did a wonderful job going over it. Think about it. You're getting close. Good, Timmy. Good. Keep it coming. What do you guys think? What are the three components that impact behavior? Good. Keep them coming, guys. Just those three components, three overarching areas. So, y'all are correct. Nobody's actually wrong, but the specific areas that we were looking for were physical, environmental, and emotional. Again, that's the physical, environmental, and emotional. All right, let's go number 4. What is missing from this? Safety, mutuality and collaboration, transparency, empowerment, and blank. Remember, these are the 5 values of humility and informed care. So what is missing? Ah, look at you folks. Brilliant. Absolutely. What is missing? Safety, mutuality and collaboration, transparency, empowerment, and blank. These are the 5 components of humility informed care. And you all are correct. It is choice. Choice is the answer, the one that is missing. Good. Excellent. Well, let's go to the next one here. What does the acronym ABC stand for? What does the acronym ABC stand for? We talked about this right before. Very good. Thank you. Anybody else? Excellent. Excellent. Antecedent. Very good. Very good. Yeah, so the answer is antecedent behavior and consequence. Antecedent behavior and consequence. Very good, folks. All right. Let's go to the next one. What are the 3 most important components of documentation? What are the 3 most important components of documentation? What are the 3 most important components of documentation? What are the 3 most important components of documentation? I just like to repeat it over and over again. You are correct. Being clear, descriptive, and objective. Fantastic. Let's go to number 7. Blank is behaving with thought. Blank is behaving with thought. Seeing a lot of similar answers. Look at that. You are correct, folks. Responding is behaving with thought. Very good. Thank you. What does the acronym EPIC stand for? Tam did a fantastic job with this. What does the acronym EPIC stand for? You guys are doing a fantastic job. Look at you. Keep them coming. What do you think? Well, I'm not going to hold it back too much longer. Environmental, physical, emotional, and communication. That is what EPIC stands for. Environmental, physical, emotional, and communication. Fantastic job, everybody. Now, penultimate question. What assessment tool assesses for physiological needs? What assessment tool assesses for physiological needs? Specific tool where we talked about. What assessment tool assesses for physiological needs? There you
Nick,
go. Yes.
when we were teaching this in person, I used to sing the acronym ABC to the Jackson Five, and I'd sing the answer to this one, and it was by the Supremes, and it was I changed the stop to this word, which is coming
Yeah.
up, in the name of love. So I'd say halt in the name of love. And I always associate acronyms with music because that helps sit in my brain.
That's brilliant. And I will leave the singing all to you, Tam. But just to let folks know, you are correct. HALT is the answer that we are looking for. Hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. And then finally, the goal is to commit to blank and the quality of blank. Fill in the blanks, folks. The goal is to commit to blank and the quality of blank. Do you think this is?
I think this popped up on a slide quite briefly. So,
It was brief. It was in big orange letters, though.
yeah. Thank you, Timmy. Thank you, Paul.
Good. Quality of life. I mean, you guys are on point. Keep them coming. What do you think? The goal is to commit to blank and the quality of blank. What do you think? All right. The goal is to commit to safety and the quality of service. The goal is to commit to safety and the quality of service provided. And congratulations, folks. I can safely say you all passed.
Thank you very much, Nick.
Of
As
course.
you, as you can see here, here are the references that we've used. And oh, Nick, could you put our website into the chat window for everyone, please?
Sure can, yeah.
Because I've just seen that we got our email on here, but not our website. And certainly, Anthony, have we got time? I'm going to stop sharing now. And let's put on our videos. And ask, is there any Q&A? Thank you.